So let's begin. Vanessa is going to start off by presenting on the Abundant Intelligences project and share insights on integrating Indigenous knowledge systems into AI development. So I'll hand it over to you, to Vanessa, to guide us through these groundbreaking concepts.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Nick, for bringing us all together today. Okay, I'm going to share, and you guys are not going to hoot and holler if you don't see things that look new to you. Okay, how's that look?
Looks good.
Okay. Looks good. All right, great. So as Bruce had shared, I'm Leasi Vanessa Lee Raymond. I'm the Director of Research Operations for the Abundant Intelligences Research Program. I'm based at Concordia University, and I'm working out of the Indigenous Futures Research Center. And, first and foremost, I just want to make sure we acknowledge the funders who funded this research program. This program is considered high risk, high reward. And so I want to acknowledge that the funders also took a risk in funding this, 48 Indigenous researchers to explore AI. So thank you to them. Before we jump in and throughout the conversation, I want to use Jamboard. Is this team comfortable and have experience using Jamboard, or do we need to do a little intro?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I would just let's try it, and if anyone needs any help, then I can help them on a sidebar.
Okay. And if you need help and you're like, I don't want to learn a new tool today, you can just put your responses in the chat and we'll move between the two of those. So are you guys seeing the Jamboard up on your screen right now? Yes. You are? Okay, great. And what you do is you grab a little sticky from the side and you say, hi, I'm Vanessa, Montreal. And while you guys are sharing, and some of you already did in the chat, I'll ask you to consider who are your relations and what do you want to share about them today, and then whose land are you on today? And I will share mine as you guys write. So I'm currently in Jojage or Muniyang, the land of the Ganyangeha people. I was born and raised in Massachusetts, so I'm an American. My mom is Samoan, so she's from the independent nation of Samoa. And she was born and raised in Papauta, which is the small little community on the side of a mountain. And her father, my grandfather, Fa'asisila Seumalu, Vincent Jacob Lee, he was born and raised in Solo Solo. Solo Solo is by the ocean. It's absolutely beautiful, tiny village. And that's where my chief title, Leasi, comes from this specific tree in Solo Solo that is called, the Asi tree, this one tree. So Leasi means the Asi tree. My maternal grandmother is To'ilalo Lee. She's still alive. She's just about to turn 94 next month. So shout out to To'ilalo. She is from Malie, which is the King's Village. And she's currently in Papauta. My dad is white. He's from Massachusetts. And so my grandmother, Helen James, is from Virginia, Massachusetts. And my grandfather, Bill Raymond, is from Hull, Massachusetts. My dad's Scottish and French. So I've got Scottish, French, and on my mom's side, Samoan and Chinese. And I'm seeing people are finding their way with Jamboard. We've got Alex dialing in from Toronto, the land of the Mississauga and the Credit and the Anishinaabeg and Chippewa and Haudenosaunee and Wendat people, like just such a overlapping area, a very rich area where a lot of people want to be. And then Alex is Norwegian and been in Canada for half my life. Wonderful. Nick, clan, the Graham clan. Okay. I am the, what is it? McPherson clan. McPherson clan. So we've got that together. All right. I see someone, Steve, is from Massachusetts, land of the Mohican. Wow, we have so many connections here. Our ancestors are having a little party. Okay, I'll give people a few more moments to fill out their little cards, and I don't see anyone in the chat, but again, if you're frustrated at all, let's not bring frustration into this and just go in the chat if that's easier for you. Wow, Bruce, Eastern Europe, Stockholm, Sweden. So we're really spanning a lot of the world in our meeting today. It's really exciting to see that. Okay, shall we move back to the talk? Or are people still working? Oh, I see. My little bar is covering some of what someone's doing, and I want to see it. Give me 1 second. Stan, you're in there. Oh, you're an innovator, Stan, because you're going into a whole new terrain with just text. I love it.
You're into some weird place.
It's
I'm
beautiful.
not sure I can post anything yet.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to jump back. You guys can keep working in the Jamboard if you want. We'll go back and forth between my slides and the Jamboard. This is really just to get you guys thinking and engaging and oh wow, you've really gone somewhere. You're an innovator. Okay, so we know who are our relations and we know whose land we're on today. You guys know a little bit about me. So the question that Abundant Intelligence is exploring is how do we transform AI, which feels like I'm in the right room, seeing as you guys are also exploring this. And our approach is that we must envision Indigenous futures, and those futures must be grounded in community priorities and dreams. And so this ability to sort of dream into the future is really foundational to the type of research that we're doing, because we don't believe that without imagining the future and the future that we want, we can't design in that direction. And anyone who's into this sort of design theory, then that probably tracks with your thoughts. So we're going to go back to the Jamboard again. And I wanted to understand, seeing as you're the transformation group, what does transformation mean to you? And I'm going to just change the slide and show you how to do that. Here, let me give me 1 second. I gotta move this. All right. So you may have seen my arrow, I'm not sure, but at the top of this bar, there's 2 little arrows, and you can slide yours over to the next one to make sure you're on the second of 3. And you should see a sticky that says, what does transformation mean to you? Your group may have a really robust working definition of transformation that I'm not aware of. So I'm really curious. And you can also share a personal vision of transformation. And this is my way of checking that I'm not coming into this talk with any assumptions, that I know what you mean by transformation, or that you know what I mean about transformation. So I'll give you guys a few minutes. Okay. I love these thoughtful responses. Can see that you're a very thoughtful and cautious group. Transformation is not optimization, but redesign. And hopefully it's better, but not always. Asking what is right and how do we figure that out? So transformation is a process. I feel like that sticky says. Redefining system goals and paradigms. So wow, this is exciting stuff. Seeing the world from a new perspective. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. And your assumptions are challenged. So people who like new things, who like to introduce new concepts. Some people hate new things. They don't want new ideas. They like their existing ones because they exist. It's great to see you have some adventurous thinkers here in the room. Hospicing dysfunctional systems. That's a great phrase. Through innovations that reshape the status quo. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to let you guys continue working there and move back into the slides, which you should see now. And the next one is, what are your, it's a very sensitive mouse situation here. What are the goals of AI? And this is something that this research program is really trying to interrogate. I think there's a lot of unspoken about goals and objectives of the AI tools that we see and that we interact with. And Abundant Intelligence is really trying to explore well, what would our goals be for AI? What would our objectives be? So I'll ask in the third page of the Jamboard for you to share any first thoughts you have. They don't have to be something you personally believe in, but what do you think that the AI you're seeing and interacting with, what are its goals and objectives? And while you guys are working on that, I have some people in the chat. So David says, embracing uncertainty. And I believe this is response to the transformation. Stan says, transformation is different from change and development in that it aims to shift focus and capacities in a more fundamental way. That's beautiful. And Sushila, am I saying your name correctly? It sounds like you're interested in embracing change for better behavior. And so it's really sort of action oriented, which is also great because we could sit around and talk about transformation all day, but if it never becomes a real thing, well, then what are we doing? Okay, so we have someone on the Jamboard who says to enhance human capacity and potential. Wow, we've got a real like sort of, I won't say linguist, but language lover here. Broligarchs is so good. Okay, to increase the wealth of tech broligarchs. I had not heard that before this moment. Thank you for that, Nick. To support the flourishing of all life. It's really beautiful. Shareholder profit, right? Incremental product driven. So not really driven by the people, but driven by some corporations, shareholder bottom line stuff. Okay, great. So I feel like I understand the room a little bit better now. And I'm really loving, I think we're going to have a great conversation. So you guys can continue to populate ideas. The Jamboard is for me, but it's also really for you to start setting up the conversation and understand each other before we go to the breakout rooms. So keep going in there if you so desire. So I'm back on the slides and I'll give you a little bit more of an overview now. And I know we're coming up on time, so I'll try to go through this quickly. So the commitment of the research program is that we stay grounded in Indigenous epistemologies. Epistemologies is basically like, how do we know what we know, right? And Indigenous communities and cultures have very different ways from each other and from sort of the Western dominant ways of knowing what they know. And so a Samoan epistemology is even quite different than a Hawaiian epistemology, even though we're very closely related culturally. And then our commitment includes being rooted in community. And we found that even though this is an Indigenous-led research program, many of the Indigenous people involved are academics. And so there's this pull, there's this gravity towards sort of academic inquiry that can sometimes be very different from what communities actually need and want. And so we make sure that our research stays rooted in communities to keep ourselves honest. And in this research, we commit to the flourishing of future generations and we plan for abundance. And you have to say this, and I appreciate that the program says this, because research doesn't always have a societal impact framework, and it doesn't always think about societal benefit. It often does, but it isn't a pre-gone conclusion that you would be. And so we're trying to be very overt and very clear that this is about like future flourishing, specifically of Indigenous people, but really all people, because we believe that Indigenous methodologies can help everybody, not just ourselves. So I wanted to share a little bit about my own motivations for being a part of this program, again, to sort of contextualize why I'm here, what I'm doing. For me, I wanted to build for us, by us. So by us, I mean Indigenous people. I have been a part of building software and socio-technological processes for about 10 years. It has not always been for us, by us. So it's great to be in a program where I actually get to do that. I'm interested in creating lasting value and lasting change. I'm sort of a mission-driven person. I'm curious about how can we make things better. I am interested in designing tech and techniques that truly serve us, and it feels like that might be an interest that resonates with people in the room here. I'm a data person, so most of the software I've been a part of building or designing or improving has been about data management and data visualization. So there's a lot of really wicked data challenges with AI, and there's a lot more wicked data challenges with Indigenous AI. And so we're tackling some very new areas in this program. I want to finally build something I believe in. And so I have been a part of building a lot of things where I've had to compromise a lot. And I've had to compromise a little bit too much. And so it's nice to sort of feel like I have a green field where I can do something that is more aligned with my vision and my values. And I want to act from my own experience and my own cultural framework. For the past decade, I've been in Alaska. So I've been in Alaska Native contexts and on Alaska Native land and working on behalf of Alaska Native communities, which is wonderful and beautiful. And I've learned quite a bit about Alaska Native people and Inuit people in general. That being said, I haven't been able to kind of talk about Samoan concepts and Samoan framework. And in some ways, I've had to put that part of myself like up on a shelf. And I want to kind of take that part of me off the shelf and back into my lived experience. So that's a little bit about me. The research came from, and you see this image, the same artist image again, 20 plus years of work related to Aboriginal people in cyberspace. So AbTech, Aboriginal territories in cyberspace, where Jason Edward Lewis, who's the principal investigator of Abundant Intelligences, and Skawanati Fragneto founded these programs and sort of drove them forward until this moment. And so we're really standing on their intellectual legacy and their intellectual yearnings as Indigenous people. So the Skins workshops came along slightly after the development of AbTech. Skins workshops teach Indigenous youth how to tell their own stories using digital media such as video games and 3D game design and now 3D printing. The Initiative for Indigenous Futures was, again, another partnership grant that brought a lot of people together to explore what do we look like in the future and how does technology play a role. The IF project begat the Indigenous Futures Research Center, and then we had this series of workshops that we've already talked a little bit about. And the people who came together to talk about this crazy thing of AI, which in 2019 was not as much at the forefront of people's minds as it is today. They weren't sure anyone would show up, right? They weren't sure Indigenous people would show up to talk about AI. And what they found was there was a lot to talk about and people were very, very committed. So from those workshop series where they, flew everyone to Hawaii and they had, 2-3 days together in a room, doing both protocol and conversation about AI. They wrote the 200-page behemoth that you saw, which has art and it has poetry and it has tech specs. It has really everything under the sun in there, which is called the position paper on Indigenous protocol and artificial intelligence. I think that's such a rich collection of work and it's worthy of revisiting sort of semi-regularly. And there's a lot of heart that went into that. But it's certainly not something to sit down and read in one go. And so after they wrote the position paper, which to date, I think is the 4th most downloaded document from Concordia's website. I think they have like 60,000 downloads or something. They realized, hey, we want to actually build some of these things. Like we want to go after some funding that can allow us to bring these ideas and concepts and dreams into the real world. So they wrote the proposal for Abundant Intelligences. They received the funding, which to be honest, no one actually thought they would get the money. And they did, they got really substantial funding to be able to bring all these people together and build tools. So I will quickly do, Nick, how am I doing on time?
Don't worry about time. I think, yeah. Yeah. How much time would you like?
How's 8 minutes?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. So I mentioned this briefly, but we have 47 co-investigators. They're across the world. 65% of our research team is Indigenous, which means 35% of our research team is non-Indigenous. So we're bringing together people in an allied support role to imagine Indigenous flourishing. And it's a beautiful thing. It's also very difficult. And there's lots and lots of lessons to be learned along the way. And I just appreciate so much everyone's earnestness to be in this together and to figure this out together. We talk about rooted in community. Abundant Intelligence has 6 pods. Our research clusters are called pods. Well, we will have 6. We currently have 5. And these are sort of community-led labs and initiatives with community members who are exploring these topics sort of at the ground level, we want to call it that. So we have a Hawaii pod, we have an Aotearoa pod, we have a Niitsitapi pod that's based out of Lethbridge University, we have a Haudenosaunee pod that's based out of Western University, and we have a Lakota pod. We will eventually have a pod based in Toronto, but that's still very much in the works. And so there's some little animations that I'll skip through just to show kind of where things are. Okay, so we are working across cultures and disciplines, and the little faint text in the back is the disciplines at the top and the cultures towards the bottom. And that's just to show that everything is sort of transdisciplinary, like we're reaching across every aisle you could ever imagine, from neuroscience to art to language to storytelling. Our desires or our research questions are how do we integrate and adapt computational methods into Indigenous knowledge systems? What are new computational practices that we need to develop? How do we use the knowledge that we have to create a more humane future? And what does a humane future mean, right? So we have to define all of these things. And then for myself personally, I'm interested in like complex research and advancing Indigenous-led inquiry. I think there's a lot of richness there that we haven't seen yet in the world. We haven't seen even how do Indigenous people come together and create something together, right? So oftentimes there's sort of, I work with this one community. Well, we have, 5 communities. How do those 5 communities come together to build something that we share with the world? How does the data work from that? How does the intellectual property work from that? What does the code base look like? So that you get into these nitty gritty things of how do you actually operationalize a big concept like this? I'm interested in research that enriches connections and deepens our engagement with culture as opposed to stripping away from our connections and stripping away from our engagement with our individual unique cultures. And then, as a data person, how do we do data governance across multiple sovereign nations? So how do the Blackfoot or the Niitsitapi share with the Aotearoa pod? What's the protocol that you need to do that? What will the elders say about this? What treaties do we need to write with each other or agreements? Not to use the big capital T treaty word, but there's a lot that's going into laying the underpinnings for research at this level. So I'm at the end, and ask for you is that we're looking for our associate director of emerging AI technologies. And we have 2 calls for postdocs out, one in Indigenous data sovereignty and one in Indigenous methodologies. I think for the AD, this person does not need to be an Indigenous person, but they need to be open to learning about and contextualizing technology within Indigenous-led spaces. I think for the postdocs, those are sort of a little bit more tied to Indigenous ways of knowing that someone would need to be able to demonstrate really a deep level of engagement there. And then if you have students who are interested in learning about Indigenous methodologies and AI methodologies, please let us know. So we have a newsletter. It's a pretty good read. You can contact us, and then the job postings are on this slide. And I think that's all I got. Yes. So fafatai tililava anuile tatuaso malo soifua, and thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah. So next phase is to go into breakout. So the idea is to dive deeper, think about how we can apply some of these principles and practices. And so we have a few themes that we are going to put out there to potentially seed discussion. And we thought we'd maybe offer these themes to each breakout group. So breakout group 1, offering you the theme of talking about relationality and kinship. And then breakout group 2, Nick, your timing is exquisite. Transferable practices from Indigenous AI. And then the third room, about this idea of community-centered AI. How does does this work? Especially, Vanessa, you raised this interesting idea. It's not one community; it's many communities, and they may have different epistemologies and ontologies. And so, how do you work with multiple communities in a way that's respectful and yet more than the sum of its parts? The idea of translocalism is really key to the sustainability transformations field. So, how do you work translocally with AI, but without a sort of a single world-encompassing technological imposition? So, what about that participatory dimension? So, Nick, are we having? I think we have pre-assigned groups. So perhaps when we get there, we'll toss these questions into your chat, your group chat, so you can have them at hand. But also feel free to talk about what issues are coming up for you as well. We don't want to prescribe the discussion. We'd like each group to have a facilitator note taker. So if you could, maybe when you pop in there, someone could volunteer or be voluntold to be the facilitator note taker for your group, just to get the conversation rolling and also capture a few takeaways. Because when we get back, we'll ask each group to share maybe one or two key takeaways from their discussion to get the conversation going again. So I think that's all I've got to get us going. Nick, why don't you activate the break?
Did that work? I sent Bruce to a room straight away. You can move around if you find a different conversation that you would rather be in, but yeah.
Well, that was a lot of fun. We were getting into it. Great. So we're back. So why don't we hear from the facilitators or folks who took notes in their respective groups, and then start a kind of cross-cutting discussion. And maybe after we hear from the groups, maybe we'll hand the baton or the mic over to Vanessa for an initial response. So which group would like to start up? I know I was with a group with Steve Waddell, and so maybe Steve can ask you to jump in.
Okay, I'll just put my notes in the chat. And I've got to go because I'm hosting a meeting. So thank you.
Good timing.
I'm trying to put them in the chat, but maybe it's too much. So there were one theme about it. We were the communities group. So one theme about it was the importance of diversity of perspective and how to bring diversity of perspective into the actual development of AI, and to do it so that AI can generate a holistic support the value of being of holistic and diverse perspectives, and sort of, so that brought up 2 points. One is about how do we actually use AI, and then how do we influence the directional development of AI so that it has that value at its core. I think that's what I would just summarize. But others, Bruce, go ahead, and Alex.
Yeah, that sounds great. Why don't we take that and hand it over to the next group to build on? Why don't we go to the transferable practices group? And Steve, you have to go. We'll see you soon.
Well, I took notes, so I'm happy to share out, but just wanted to invite, if anyone from the group, Marilyn or Vanessa, but yeah, happy to share. And Stan, by the way, I'll invite you at the end because you were mid-thought. Would love to hear what that thought was. I'm just going to let David back in. Okay. So our group, we were looking at relationality and kinship, and we got into the juicy fundamentals of what does it mean to have a relationship with the algorithm, with AI. How does it relate to the creator? What are the imprints from the creator, the biases that may be visible or invisible? It's quite well documented, the white male biases that have been evident through Google or whatever. But also right now, as we accelerate towards some kind of AI singularity, the roots of extractive capitalism are very present. So what could be the relationship with AI that's perhaps more based on reciprocity? I really liked the idea of what is offered to the earth in exchange for the minerals at a very basic physical level, or this concept that Marilyn introduced of when you share a drink with the group, one drink is passed around and everyone is trusted to know that what is the right amount. So how could that kind of thinking be imprinted so that AI sees itself in relationship to everything else? Because at the end of the day, that is life. What could be the principles of life that are foundational, whether it's regeneration or permaculture or biomimicry? And then we were talking about some inspiring examples of people, and we have some of those in this very room. So we were just really seeing these conversations as fundamental ways to learn together, to rub shoulders, to this kind of mindset shift, whether it's increased awareness or deepening learnings and collaborations. So I'll pause there and just hand over to Stan, because Stan, you were talking about some interesting concepts around AI as culture and what has escaped capitalism. I wondered if there's anything you wanted to add.
I'm very inspired by the idea that people are working on alternative ways of really embedding values into AI, which includes innovative ways of using it. I'm also very concerned because I don't have examples of the modern systems that have escaped advanced capitalism and the ways in which it works. So it's always here both a conceptual thing. I think it's very important to invent things, because if we don't invent them, there will be no user. On the other hand, I think it's very important to understand the economic drivers of this. And if we leave out the economic drivers, I think that's very, very important. I mean, I was going to make a joke to Marilyn, but the Swedes I know would not have a thing left in the cup. And that's because I think that may be the case that Swedes drink differently outside of Sweden than they drink in Sweden. But I think the tension between that too, right? The ethos of we shared the cup and there must be the same amount left for the last person, and the ethos of I've got the cup. Those are clearly in tension here, but it's an economic tension, not just a conceptual one. And so I really was driving this notion that we are cultures in competition, but we're cultures in competition with the capitalist underbelly to the one culture.
Thanks, Dan. Marilyn, do you want to add a word? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I think before you joined us, I mentioned, and to me, it's an important point here. What has really inspired me, and a lot has, but what has really inspired me in this meeting and in the documents I was reading before is the concept of binding protocols that will get away from this reliance on the assumptions, ethics, and values of the programmer, so that something to go by. I think that was what we lacked when we were discussing this sort of stuff decades ago in the 1980s and stuff. We couldn't see how to do it without having, somebody from every possible background in every team. That just doesn't work. So despite the fact that Vanessa has shown the way with that, I mean, that is still a certain group. It's, So protocols, I'm really excited by this prospect, and I'd love to see us do some work on that together.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Marilyn. Let's go over to our last group.
There wasn't another group. So
well, there you go.
Just the two.
Well, let's maybe discuss amongst ourselves, and I'd love to hand the mic to you, Vanessa. What'd you hear that resonated with you?
Well, first of all, I'm just grateful for this time together and the fact that you all lent your time to this conversation. What I think is that this group of people seems to have a lot of answers. And I think there are a lot of other people out there who have answers about how it should look and what we should be doing. And the more we could find each other and sort of bolster each other and share stories, the stronger that narrative will be. I think, Stan, your concerns, I think we probably all share them, and those fears and those worries. And it does feel overwhelming at times, for sure. But at the same time, you can even see the cracks in the sort of financial imperative for AI. You can see Goldman Sachs putting out statements about not investing further in AI. You can see that there might be a bubble that might be popping at some point soon. And so if the bottom line doesn't bottom line, then there may be an opportunity for really a lot more localized AI, which I think is what we're sort of talking around, hyper local solutions. And that is encouraging to me, but I'm, sort of a nerd and a rebel. So of course I like those types of ideas. I'm curious to hear from David.
Yeah. Oops, I think you went. Yeah, you went. Mike went dead, but we're good. David.
No problem. I think it was our conversation was captured, but yeah, I think there is this problem with making AI profit. A driver for or be driven by profit, but it's a little bit deeper than that in the sense that there is also a mechanism to concentrate power and also an accelerator of all the things that we do already. Now, the problem is that if we were doing good things generally in the world and we have an accelerator, then it would be amazing, right? But I think we're in a situation in which this AI came too early, and we don't have any braking mechanisms because it's like a multipolar trap. I don't know whether you have heard that term, right? In which first movers have an advantage. If you take into account the risk of the thing that you're doing, other people are going to do it, and then they are going to pull you out to the market. So for me, it's very hard for me to be optimistic about AI playing a role in this context. If the context were different, I would be totally fully, and it's so beautiful. I use AI, I use for writing things and stuff. I love the technology. But at this moment, it's accelerating, taking us into a self-termination or maybe a transformation, a big transformation. Maybe this transformation needs to happen, and AI is taking us there, accelerating the path, right? Sorry, I cannot be more optimistic than that, but
yeah, Alex, over to you.
No, I am an optimist in general, but I feel like we have a finite time to try to get enough voices around the table to steer the ship in a different direction. It's very shareholder profit driven. And I find there's a couple of comments I wanted to make, and I put the links in the notes as well. One thing is, for instance, there was an article in Wall Street Journal recently, and I see that a lot in nonprofit and philanthropy that are saying, what has AI done? It's literally done nothing at this point. And it's just it's incremental product driven. That is so short-sighted to see what ChatGPT and Claude and everything is doing. If you're looking at the negative side, what AI is doing for democracy, or what it's just really starting to do for the deception economy on the negative side, and a lot of other areas, military being one. Or on the positive side, looking to see what it's doing. For instance, I'm advising an indigenous AI company that's using thermal and vision AI for detection of wildfires. Look at the healthcare costs and the climate effects in Canada alone from wildfires. It's dramatic. What it's doing to moving us from reactive through preventative to predictive medicine around cardiovascular disease. Like these are immense aspects of both negative and positive. And I don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that it is what Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI is doing on the product side. I think that's dangerous because we need diversity and voices to escape the imaginary crisis and really envision what, and I think it was Dalai Lama that said, if we can't see the beneficial future, we can't act upon it. We need to collectively have a diversity in voices and act upon so we can effectuate that positive future. And I think that's so crucial.
Yeah. Who else would like to jump in?
Or do you have any questions for Vanessa? Like I'm interested in what Alex just shared around these imaginal cells, or cells of us imagining these more positive and life-affirming futures. So is that something tangible that we could do? And just also thinking of moving into action as well. But I wondered if anyone has any questions for Vanessa as well. What can we do?
I have lots of questions. And it doesn't come to a surprise because I've asked some of these in different ways before. But two things that I really like with your project and your approach, and we've talked about it before. One is in an area where the speed of the technology is insane. People, organizations, communities don't feel like they can keep up. Moving at the speed of intention, how you're managing to do that while still responding to a fast-moving technology. And just to Nick's point about how do we imagine together, I love the setup of the pods. How do you effectuate both localizing it, but then collaborating and synthesizing the information and knowledge collectively?
Yeah, that's one of the most complex things that I've ever had to tackle as a program manager. So our pod lead is a academic who is Indigenous. So an Indigenous academic from the community that the pod is in. So, a Maori lead in the Aotearoa pod, Kanaka Maoli in the Hawaiian pod. And so they already have, right, a lifetime of relations, and they've been working in their community. They're not starting from scratch. So, that's one of the hardest things to do in community-oriented research, is to build the relations. They have those. They need to build a network of other researchers there, and they need to sort of strengthen the ability to share knowledge. So that sort of transdisciplinary language that they need to create is a big challenge. It's a bigger challenge than I think any of us thought about, because we have soil scientists, we have neuroscientists, we've got artists, it's everything. And then we also are looking at how do we fund sort of like documentarians, archivists, like people coordinators who can share information back with the program management team, so that we understand what's happening and we understand how to better support the research. So there's a lot of that sort of transactional understanding of each other, a lot of building relationships. And then we have all these non-Indigenous unpodded researchers who want to be a part of this, right? Where can the data live, right? Whose intellectual property is it? Like there's real mechanical things that we need to understand before we can effectively even begin. And so the first 2 years are that intentional pace of how do we share with each other? How do we draw people in? How do we get non-Indigenous researchers and enough cultural understanding to feel safe, because that's an unsafe position for them also to be in, and to not perpetuate any harm. So there's a lot of work around those areas right now. But I do think that we're really about to step out into the public and to start to show what we've been building and show our processes and publish protocols and governance documents and all of this, so that really people can see, how does this work or not work? It's a grand experiment for us. Did that answer it, Alex? Yeah. Okay, great. And I'm going to have to move to plug in. I'll just be off video, but I'm still here.
We have just a few minutes left. And we could continue this conversation all day. So I encourage you, Yeah, Marilyn, you have something. You have an urgent last word. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Ukraine. I work a lot with Ukraine. And of course, the question of indigenous and not indigenous is a hugely controversial topic there, but also both the scope and the need for something like AI for rebuilding is also huge. Maybe we could be looking at a Ukrainian pod or something. Really, I mean, I have contact with the whole network of public libraries and also academic libraries, plus several universities and several hundred teachers, school teachers. I'm just thinking there's so much, because the work of reconstruction is going to be absolutely enormous. And
yeah, we had a part of our last conference was in Prague, and it really had a Eastern European focus, and so we have some pretty strong involvement and engagement in there. So the idea of perhaps regionalizing some of these discussions. We also have, our next conference is in Africa, where there are also a lot of needs, and there's a lot of challenges, and so I think the idea of we seem as a community, as the transformations community, we operate at multiple scales. And we have our community work, and then we have our regional associations. And of course, those regional associations have their own specific needs and opportunities. And then at the topmost level, we have the global community as a whole. And so I wanted to have a few minutes, and we have about 14 minutes left, to introduce a challenge to the group, which is, I think, analogous to what you were just saying, Vanessa. It's like, how do you organize the community of active practitioners? And so we think of ourselves as researchers and practitioners in the transformations community. How do we organize ourselves most effectively, and how can AI both be a topic and something we provide and develop, and also a tool that assists our coordination? So we're doing this conference series every 2 years, and so we have a great lineup for next year in South Africa, in Kruger National Park, and also in York in the UK. We have on-site events in June in York, and then in South Africa in August. And we also have a plan for a very large online gathering, because we don't want to set up a situation where everyone needs to fly to South Africa. And so this builds on our prior experience, and we're thinking, how can AI platform assist in this sort of global, multi-sided, hybrid set of offerings that we're planning to do, and in a way that reflects our values, and that is an experiment in itself in community-centered, life-affirming AI, and that is controlled and oriented toward the needs of our community and not the needs of the technologists who developed it. So I want to ask you, folks, for just to begin that conversation, to think about how we can perhaps guide and be advisory to this process of the community itself, the transformations community, designing and implementing some AI platforms to support our conference series and beyond. We have some initial ideas about it, but what are the capacities and functionalities we need to develop, and how should we engage our community in that development process? Which is a globally dispersed community. So maybe I'll start. I want to just open up a question to the group. So what do we need to know about the community to understand their needs, and how can we get to know it, in an efficient way in a globally distributed community? What are there any available use cases that we can start with to think about how can we develop AI platforms that would enhance our community's communications, coordination, and networking? Does anyone have anything they'd like to share around that?
A small one. I just attended last week the Higher Education Summit in Italy, in Padua. And the alternate years, it's all online. So next year will be online. Mm-hmm. And one thing that struck me very strongly in the last few, I usually have some kind of input there, some kind of workshop or whatever. What has struck me is the difficulty of organizing a program that is sufficiently flexible and yet viewable, easy to navigate. And I would really love to see something that's designed more along the lines of open space technology. And I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I hear you. For program navigation, identifying, which sessions might be most suited to different interests. Anyone else have seen some exciting ideas or has some insight on how do we engage the community in this, Alex?
Yeah, no, obviously there's practical tools that could be applicable, and especially between now and then there could be even more. But I think it's partially to Marilyn's point, but I think this is an opportunity in a lot of spaces for AI to disrupt in positive ways systems, whether or not you're talking about educational systems, or what we're focused on a lot is knowledge mobilization. Like for sectors such as nonprofit philanthropy, academia has not shared and mobilized knowledge well. Like I talked to some of the biggest organizations in Canada, for instance, on the poverty side, that's sitting on 99% underutilized data. This is an opportunity to rethink, to your point, Marilyn, open platforms, open data, sort of de-silo our approach, because the for-profit driven side is siloing, whether or not you talk about data, platforms. This is an opportunity to really decentralize how we mobilize knowledge, leaning into data that's respecting data privacy, respecting data sovereignty. And the technology isn't the issue, it's mindset and culture. So how can we in this community, but larger as well? Like I work with the larger coalitions in the nonprofit space, and there's a large one on that's got substantial funding in Canada on the academia side, led by Senator Lapointe at McMaster, around this. But we need cross-sector conversations, cross-region collaboration on this, and I think that's, rather than not a specific tool, the methodologies are really crucial. And I want to just send a link to, I just had a meeting with Audrey Tang, who just stepped down from being the digital minister in Taiwan. She wrote a book called Plurality that's covering a lot of these topics. So I was
Fantastic. Yeah, I would love to see those resources and maybe compile them and share them with the group. I think and then what I hear you saying, Alex, is it's not just about designing and creating and offering a platform. It's about doing this in a very transparent, open, reflective, dialogic way that reflects and starts a conversation within the community around these platforms and how we can, as you described, Vanessa, develop protocols that could kind of shape our adoption and our use. Anyone else want to jump into this, David?
Yeah, well, you can use, I guess, AI to provide more exchange of data and all that, organize things. But I would see that as an opportunity to then dedicate time to real connections that are not to accelerate things, more data, more. No, I mean, let's AI do that job so that we can focus on the human things, I guess. So I think that would be another angle. And then, because there's the risk of end up working for the technology, right? End up, all this data that the technology gives you, then you have to process it, and it's,
Can AI help us with those communications, or is it more that we get the technology and the information sharing more efficiently done so we can do more networking and human connection?
Yeah. I've been at conferences, for example, in Finland, physical conferences where ahead of time they allow you to advertise on a meetup site saying, I'd like to meet you if you're interested in blah, blah, blah. And then you can book a place and a time to meet during the conference. And I think this is really, really valuable, and it could also be for solely online conferences as well. You could have corners, as it were, that were set aside for one-on-one or small group conversations, and you can advertise in advance. Like now in Padua, I was trying hard to find a participant from Zurich for various reasons. didn't manage to locate anybody during the whole conference. So.
Yeah, perhaps the AI itself could sort of be a matchmaking tool, because it could analyze people's abstracts and have a better understanding of where some commonalities is. Of course, there's all kinds of trapdoors inherent in that. And anyone
Absolutely.
else?
Yeah, I had similar thoughts along these lines. So the knowledge transfer piece is something that's quite alive. This event or a conference, how much of that is recreated elsewhere? How much of that is lost? And so maybe there's something that we could do around sharing the insights and the invitations from events. And then in the bigger context of a community, those offers and needs. So I think there are some, Marilyn, you mentioned some solutions out there. They could get a bit better, because at the end of the day, I totally agree. It's all about that culture of, is there a culture of asking, of collaboration? So what could our tech friends do to help us in that trust building process? For me, it all comes down to relationships is building trust. Is that's where the collaboration comes. So I'm curious if that is exclusively a human thing, or if there are ways that we could be helped in that to understand culture or to understand context, whatever it might be, because it's not always just as easy as I want this and someone else has that, and just doing the matchmaking. There needs to be that soft process of relationship building as well. So to me, that comes down to weaving, but that's conversation another day.
What I hear you say, Nick, and what I'm feeling is coming up is that we should perhaps have a design charrette and play around with some of these ideas and think about how both these broader intentions and also the specific functionalities could be developed. So, and I think that would be a great topic for another one of our meetings. So to really dig in and think about how we can support both the subject of AI and the developed of more equitable or more human-centered AI, but also what functionalities would kind of illustrate that, or perhaps even we could think about having a kind of tech showcase of possibly exemplary AI platforms or developments in the field, as well as a critical look at the limitations of the technology and its techno-capitalist basis. So let me ask you all one last question where we have to go, which is, if we're going to do a session like that, a kind of design charrette or a sprint about how we can create a creative and learning experience associated with the conference and how AI can contribute to that, what should we do beforehand as a community to support that sprint? What would you like to see before we get into that meeting? How should we inform that design experience so it's efficient and effective and a good use of your time? How can we prepare for that meeting if we're going to dig deep and generate some actual actionable ideas?
Kind of specification of what it is we are trying to support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, be really clear about our intentions and maybe some of how it relates to our core principles as a community. Alex, I wonder if I could call you out, because I know you've done a lot of this kind of work. So how do we do a community co-design, or how would you support a community co-design process like what I'm describing?
Yeah, and trying to understand like who's the audience that you're trying to co-create with, making sure that you're catering to both in-person, asynchronous, almost like lab sessions to really co-design it. But also, if the intention is to try to evolve with the technology and to change how we're developing it for specific purposes that benefit the audience, allowing ourselves to experiment as well.
Yeah. I see Vanessa has to go. Vanessa, just before you go, I want to thank you.
Oh, she just had to jump.
Oh, well, she's out. I'll thank her remotely. Continue, Alex.
Yeah, no, I think that would be my approach to run various whether you're talking about online sessions or like asynchronous or synchronous sessions for almost like lab design to try to get as much input as you can to how do you want to.
So we should maybe lay out the options.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? Kind of how do we move toward a community-supported, co-designed AI platform that we could kind of demo or prototype at our next conference series?
Well, I guess we all have our own ideas about what AI can do and all that, and the more we share them ahead of time, the more we come up to a common understanding, common language to talk about these things, the better, right? This is very general, but it's we shouldn't assume that everyone understands or is positioned in the same way in relation to this to AI. It's very controversial topic. I mean, there is always like a spectrum of depending on where you're coming from, and so that needs to be addressed, right?
Don't develop one solution, assuming that we have one set of needs or interests. Well, we're at the top. We're at the 30-minute mark. I like to end on time and respect your time. It's been a really rich conversation. We'll summarize it, send it around, and continue our association. Maybe let's see. Any final thoughts or anything anyone like to add before we wrap up for today?
It's great.
Thank you for organizing this.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Thanks everyone for your time. Really glad we had this opportunity to meet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.